Anyone who believes that perception is reality is never going to be as worried about reality as they are about the perception. And that's the case with America. They have spent more effort than any nation in history crafting their image while completely neglecting the substance. America is a perception. America is a perception and not a reality. From George Washington's false teeth to Donald Trump's fake tan. America has always tried to look like what they're not. But here's the reality. America did not become the unipolar global superpower because they defeated everyone else. They defeated everyone else and they rose to a position of supremacy. No, America never won global dominance. It wasn't through superiority. It wasn't through conquest. You know, it wasn't through some grand triumph of strategy or innovation. No, they inherited it by forfeit. After World War II, the European empires collapsed. Britain, France, Germany. They were all too battered and too broken from the war to maintain their grip on power, their grip on the world, their empire. And then by the early 1990s, the only real challenger to America was the Soviet Union, and that imploded under its own dysfunction. The U.S. didn't have to beat anyone to claim the throne. They just stepped in when the previous rulers fell apart. That's not supremacy, that's opportunism. But what did they do once they had this power? They rigged the global economy in their favor.
What's up, my good people? Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing good from wherever you're watching me from. I'm definitely happy to see you and have you once again on this platform. In case you're coming across this channel for the first time, welcome to this little corner of the internet where we learn, we soak information, we seek for information about our Black history, about our Black selves. We empower and inspire and motivate ourselves and tell our very own stories from our very own Black perspective. Now, right today in this video, I want us to talk a little bit about radical idealism. And what is radical idealism? So, leading us into this thought is a video by Shahid Bolsen. Let's watch, let's listen, and let's learn. At the end of this video, we'll have something to say. So let's jump right into the video.
So, of course, when we're talking about the problem maker, we're talking about America. You know, if you're talking about world politics. So the intelligent person, under the influence of propaganda, knows that America is criminal. They know that America is criminal, but they feel that nothing can ever really change. They feel that nothing will ever truly be done about it. And the idiot, under the influence of propaganda, believes that America is wonderful. He doesn't believe that they're criminal. He believes that they're virtuous, and he believes that anyone and everyone who opposes America must be evil and wicked and tyrannical, and they must hate liberty and justice and goodness and all of those things. And they also believe that no one will ever be able to defeat America. They believe that everyone will be mowed down who opposes the United States of America. That's the unintelligent person. So they're not pessimistic, they're optimistic. They're ignorantly blissful, and they're full of hope, and they're full of pride, and so on. But the intelligent person feels overwhelmed. They feel distressed, and they feel guilty, and they feel pessimistic, and they feel hopeless. So you see, both of them have a different reaction to the drug of propaganda. But what they have in common is they both have the fundamental belief in America's unquestionable, unchallengeable supremacy. And again, just like someone on narcotics, just like someone who's drunk or who's on pills or what have you, just like someone who is intoxicated, someone who is under the influence of propaganda, they can't think straight. Their judgment is impaired. Their discernment is impaired. Their ability to fully comprehend, their ability to think properly, to perceive things properly is crippled. It dulls their analytical skills, and it dulls their observational skills. They can't process information correctly. They can't process information effectively. So the good news is, if you feel depressed, if you're a person who feels depressed, you feel hopeless or what have you, it most likely means that you are an intelligent, moral person. But the bad news is, it also means that you are under the influence of indoctrination and propaganda. And this intellectual and psychological narcotic has impaired your mind. It has impaired your judgment. It has impaired your intelligence. And that's actually what's causing your depression. So let me sober you up. Because the antidote for defeatism, the antidote for hopelessness today in 2025, alhamdulillah, is actually just objectivity. That's all the detox you need. Pessimism and defeatism are the surest signs or the surest indications that someone is misinformed. It means that they're not actually following or anyway not understanding what's happening in the world. I mean, they're probably smart. They probably have intelligence, but their intelligence has been short-circuited by propaganda. Their intelligence has been paralyzed by propaganda. Because being defeatist and being pessimistic means that you know that there are problems, you know what the problems are, and you know who is causing the problems, but you think that the problems can't be solved, and you think that the problem maker can't be stopped. That's what happens when intelligent people are drugged by the narcotic of indoctrination. And, you know, just like with drugs, different people have different reactions. Well, intelligent people, moral people, principled people, decent people, they react one way. That's the way they react. They get depressed, they get stressed, they feel despondent. They can see what's wrong, but they can't see any hope of making things better because of the propaganda. And then they take that same approach to activism with that same mindset. They may be activists, they probably are activists, but they're largely being activists just to relieve their own tension, their own stress, to ease their minds in some way. You know, they do symbolic activism, but inside, they feel like they're just shouting at the wind, like they're doing something that's futile. They're activists because of their own moral character, but not out of any realistic expectation of succeeding, because the propaganda has made them think it's impossible. That's the intelligent person, the decent person on the drug of indoctrination. That's how it usually manifests with them. The unintelligent and the indecent person on the drug of indoctrination just sides with power. They believe in the supremacy of power, and they believe that with power, automatically, it comes with moral legitimacy. So, of course, when we're talking about the problem maker, we're talking about America. You know, if you're talking about world politics. So the intelligent person, under the influence of propaganda, knows that America is criminal. They know that America is criminal, but they feel that nothing can ever really change. They feel that nothing will ever truly be done about it. And the idiot, under the influence of propaganda, believes that America is wonderful. He doesn't believe that they're criminal. He believes that they're virtuous, and he believes that anyone and everyone who opposes America must be evil and wicked and tyrannical, and they must hate liberty and justice and goodness and all of those things. And they also believe that no one will ever be able to defeat America. They believe that everyone will be mowed down who opposes the United States of America. That's the unintelligent person. So they're not pessimistic, they're optimistic. They're ignorantly blissful, and they're full of hope, and they're full of pride, and so on. But the intelligent person feels overwhelmed. They feel distressed, and they feel guilty, and they feel pessimistic, and they feel hopeless. So you see, both of them have a different reaction to the drug of propaganda. But what they have in common is they both have the fundamental belief in America's unquestionable, unchallengeable supremacy. And again, just like someone on narcotics, just like someone who's drunk or who's on pills or what have you, just like someone who is intoxicated, someone who is under the influence of propaganda, they can't think straight. Their judgment is impaired. Their discernment is impaired. Their ability to fully comprehend, their ability to think properly, to perceive things properly is crippled. It dulls their analytical skills, and it dulls their observational skills. They can't process information correctly. They can't process information effectively. So the good news is, if you feel depressed, if you're a person who feels depressed, you feel hopeless or what have you, it most likely means that you are an intelligent, moral person. But the bad news is, it also means that you are under the influence of indoctrination and propaganda. And this intellectual and psychological narcotic has impaired your mind. It has impaired your judgment. It has impaired your intelligence. And that's actually what's causing your depression. So let me sober you up. Because the antidote for defeatism, the antidote for hopelessness today in 2025, alhamdulillah, is actually just objectivity. That's all the detox you need. Just a realistic, objective dose of facts. Because the facts prove that your hopelessness, your defeatism, and so on, your depression, it's irrational. Your belief that America is too strong, too powerful, too important, too rich, or whatever, that it's too great of a country or what have you to be stopped, that's irrational. It's not fact-based. And in fact, the main place that America still has power is only in your own mind. And that's because the main power that they have ever had was the power of propaganda, the power of, Hollywood, movies, television, and so on. Oh, they built a strong narrative about themselves. Yes, they did. It's a very strong and persuasive narrative. They made a picture of themselves as a superhero. They made their whole story, their whole history, a superhero story, a comic book. And the narrative, that story, that propaganda, got pumped into your brain morning, noon, and night your whole lifetime until America never had to actually be, in reality, America never had to actually be what they made you think it was because they made you think it was. I mean, they told you already, they taught you. This is a big thing in the West. Perception is reality. That's the first clue. Perception is reality. They grasp that concept very well. But you should know that anyone who says that, anyone who actually believes that, it means that they're never going to actually be what they try to make you think that they are. Because they're not worried about being it. They're just worried about you perceiving them to be it. You understand? Anyone who believes that perception is reality is never going to be as worried about reality as they are about the perception. And that's the case with America. They have spent more effort than any nation in history crafting their image while completely neglecting the substance. America is a perception. America is a perception and not a reality. From George Washington's false teeth to Donald Trump's fake tan. America has always tried to look like what they're not. But here's the reality. America did not become the unipolar global superpower because they defeated everyone else. They defeated everyone else and they rose to a position of supremacy. No, America never won global dominance. It wasn't through superiority. It wasn't through conquest. It wasn't through some grand triumph of strategy or innovation. No, they inherited it by forfeit. After World War II, the European empires collapsed. Britain, France, Germany. They were all too battered and too broken from the war to maintain their grip on power, their grip on the world, their empire. And then by the early 1990s, the only real challenger to America was the Soviet Union, and that imploded under its own dysfunction. The U.S. didn't have to beat anyone to claim the throne. They just stepped in when the previous rulers fell apart. That's not supremacy, that's opportunism. But what did they do once they had this power? They rigged the global economy in their favor. They built an empire not of colonies, but of financial dependencies. The three pillars of America's false power. First, you had the Bretton Woods. In 1944, the United States forced the world to accept the US dollar as the global reserve currency. That meant that every country in the world needed US dollars for international trade. This wasn't because the dollar was superior. It wasn't because American goods were superior. It was because America dictated the rules. The result of that was that the US then could print money without consequences. They could run massive deficits. They could fund endless wars. They could fund their military-industrial complex. And they could still force other nations to hold their currency. The entire global economy became a hostage to the dollar. I mean, we talk about Bretton Woods a lot. Maybe I should sort of explain it because it's a very good example of what kind of a friend America is to its allies. Truly. They supposedly rescued the world from fascism in World War II, but then they seized upon the weakness and the vulnerability of their own allies by shoving the Bretton Woods Agreement down their throats. It was ruthless. In 1944, at Bretton Woods, it's a place, the United States imposed a financial order that forced all of the other nations in the world into a permanent state of dependence upon the dollar. Those countries didn't agree to it because it was a good deal. Don't misunderstand. They did it because they were left with no alternative. Like I said, after the war. See, there's a theme here. You'll see there's a theme to America's dominance. The theme of America's dominance is the absence of alternatives. They only win when there is no competition. You understand? At that time, Europe was destroyed, like I said. Japan was in ruins. China had been devastated. Even Britain, the so-called, British Empire, was bankrupt. The only country that actually emerged from the war, World War II, stronger than before the war was the United States. Well, I mean, all of the other countries were fighting for survival. America's industries were booming. Its economy was thriving. And most importantly, at that time, they held 75% of the world's gold. So what did the US do? They forced the world to use the dollar as the foundation of the global financial system that we know today. Every currency was pegged to the dollar. And the dollar, they said, was to be backed by gold at $35 an ounce. This was a brilliant deception because the United States was essentially saying, we hold the world's gold, so if you want a stable financial system, just trust our money, trust the dollar. And the world was desperate for stability after World War II, and they went along with it. Bretton Woods was sold as a way to prevent economic crises, like the Great Depression. They had just gone through that before the war. It was a way for the U.S. to lock countries into a financial straitjacket where they could never truly be independent, and it kept fueling the American economy. London had been previously the financial heart of the world, but after Bretton Woods, it was New York. It was New York. The British Empire was dying, and the Americans wanted to inherit its position. You see how they do? It's not by courage, it's by conniving that America extorted their way to power. But let me repeat, the countries didn't eagerly sign up to this system. They had no choice but to sign up to this system. The U.S. controlled the gold, they controlled the loans, they controlled the trade routes, and they had the military power. Again, not because of earned supremacy, but because everyone else had suffered the devastation of World War II. That was the beginning of America's military power, because the war had been fought in Europe and in the Pacific, not in America. The UK got bombed, France got bombed, Russia got bombed, the Netherlands, Belgium, Hungary, Finland, Romania, you name it. Denmark, Spain, Austria, all got bombed. All of them got bombed. And of course, Germany obviously got bombed. Italy got bombed. And Japan not only got bombed, but it had the atomic bombs were dropped on them. Even Egypt got bombed. China, the Philippines, India, even all the way down Australia. Everybody got bombed. Everybody except America. America didn't get one bomb, except for Pearl Harbor at the beginning, which wasn't officially even part of America at that time. It was a colony. Everybody got wiped out. All their economies were destroyed. Their infrastructure was destroyed and so on. Manufacturing, everything. And then here comes America, like some ambulance chasing shyster lawyer to a car wreck on the side of the road, clicking his pen and telling some half comatose victim of a car crash, just sign on the dotted line. That's what America did after World War II. It's ruthless and predatory. That's your good friend. That's your special friend, Special relationship, special friendship. You thought he was giving you a lifeline. He was actually putting you on a leash. And if you resisted, if Europe resisted, well, you risked economic isolation, financial strangulation. Countries that went against the United States, against their financial interests, you'd find yourself targeted politically, destabilized, or even overthrown. Subversion, everything. All they had to do was call you a communist. If you don't want to go along with America's plan, they just call you a communist. But here's where the real fraud becomes clear. In 1971, as the year I was born, Nixon ended the gold standard. The entire premise of Bretton Woods, the whole idea that the dollar was backed by gold, was a lie. Now the dollar wasn't backed by anything, but it was too late for anyone to pull out of the system by then. So what did that mean? It meant that the U.S. now they don't have to have you don't even have to have gold now, right? So then they could print unlimited amounts of money, and they could impose sanctions against any enemy country. They could weaponize the financial system, and they could exploit the rest of the world without producing anything of real value. This was the beginning of the end of productivity in America, of real productive activity in America. Now, that might sound good in the short term, and it has been very good and profitable for a certain group of people, but it's not sustainable. That's a counterfeit economy. You know, if you have not earned your dominance, if you have not earned your high status, if you have tricked your way into power, if you got into that position by forfeiture of others, well, you won't know how to act, and you won't know how to maintain it. And America hasn't known how to maintain it. You know, you'll be like one of those lottery winners who goes broke a year later after they win the lottery because you didn't come up right. You didn't come. You weren't raised for this. You didn't work your way to the top. So now their system is collapsing. You know, countries are waking up to this whole scam. Russia, China, the global south, BRICS, they're all looking for ways to escape the dollar, and they're doing it. And America knows that if the dollar falls, American power falls with it. So understand this, the unipolar world order was not built on American strength. It was built on a rigged financial game, and that game is almost up. When Nixon abandoned the gold standard in the 1970s, the system should have collapsed at that time. But the United States made a deal with Saudi Arabia. The deal was that the Saudis would only sell oil in dollars, the petrodollar. So now every country in the world would need US dollars because every country in the world needs oil. But this was nothing short of economic extortion. It's a racket. It's a mafia-style shakedown on a global scale. And of course, you can't separate this, what America did with Saudi Arabia, you can't separate this from the existence of Israel and America's support for Israel as a destabilizing force in the Middle East. America didn't just offer a deal to Saudi Arabia in the 1970s. No, they backed Saudi Arabia into a corner. And the tool that they used to manufacture that vulnerability, the instrument that ensured that the Gulf states had no choice but to submit to American dictates, was Israel. I mean, let's go back and actually understand that history properly. How Israel was designed to sabotage the region. When the Western powers created Israel, they didn't do it out of some deep sympathy for the Jews after the Holocaust. They didn't care about that at all. They did it because they needed a permanent source of conflict in the Middle East. They needed to ensure that that region could never unify, could never stabilize, and could never emerge as an independent power bloc. Think about it. Before Israel existed, there was no Middle East conflict. But before there was Israel, there was no Middle East conflict. There was no deep-rooted division between the Arab states. That division was manufactured. And after Israel was established, what happened? War, chaos, you know, the rise of revolutionary movements, militant movements, because Arab leaders and their people recognized that their sovereignty was under attack. So then you had Nasserism in Egypt, which emerged as a direct response to Zionism, a direct response to Western imperialism. Then Baathism in Syria and in Iraq. It's for the same reason, to create strong independent states that could resist Israel and Western domination. Israel is at the root of all of this, even communism. And all of this that was going on terrified Saudi Arabia. You know, the monarchy was sitting on a sea of oil, and everyone knew that controlling the oil meant controlling the future, really meant controlling the world. By the 1970s, America saw their opportunity. They were losing in the war in Vietnam. Their economy was in turmoil. Like I said, when they abandoned the gold standard, that was going to destroy the whole Bretton Woods system. No one was going to need the US dollar if it wasn't tied to gold. So they needed a new system of control. They needed a new way, you know, some other commodity basically to tie the dollar to, and that was oil. But of course, they needed the Gulf states to comply. At that time, Saudi Arabia was surrounded by threats, all of them created, fueled, or exacerbated by the existence of Israel. The Arab-Israeli wars had radicalized many people in the region. You had, of course, Nasser and Nasserism, and that was regarded by the Saudis as posing a threat to them. the same way that they see the Ikhwan as posing a threat to them, and what the Ikhwan calls for. You know, the Palestinians had resistance movements. There was so-called terrorism going on, and any of these things could have greatly destabilized the Saudi government. And of course, the Cold War meant that the Soviet Union was ready to support any movement in the Arab world that opposed American-backed rulers, and the Saudis had been backed by the U.S. So Saudi Arabia was afraid, and the U.S. exploited that fear. They told the Saudis, if you want to keep your government, if you want to remain on the throne, you want protection, okay. This is what America said. Here's the deal. You will only sell oil in US dollars, and in return, we'll make sure that your regime survives. This wasn't a friendly negotiation. This was economic blackmail. America created the conditions of instability through its support for Israel and through its sponsorship of coups and conflicts and assassinations and so on. Then they turned around and presented themselves as the only solution, the only source of stability. So Saudi Arabia didn't feel that they had a choice. And if they had refused, then they would have been isolated. Their assets in Western banks would have been confiscated, as what happened to Iran later. They would have faced a potential CIA coup, just like what happened in Iran in the 1950s, just like in Guatemala, just like in Congo, just like in Indonesia. There could have either been a Soviet-backed or a Western-backed insurgency or overthrow attempt. You know, a possible embargo, economic embargo by the West. So they agreed to the petrodollar deal because, as far as they could see, the alternative was their own destruction. And no, this wasn't because, again, because America was so powerful. It was because they were so predatory. This is the difference. They didn't achieve their power by virtue, but by villainy. Like I said before, America only seemed powerful because they were just so ruthless with whatever power they did have. They were so criminal, so psychopathically and so brazenly criminal in their abuse of their power. And that's how the modern global economy was built, not on free markets, not on fair trade, but on coercion, on extortion, on blackmail, on threats. The dollar only remained the global reserve currency because of ensuring that oil, the most critical commodity on earth, especially at that time, that they made sure that it could only be bought and sold in dollars. That meant that every country in the world had to hold dollars in reserve, which meant that they had to also, in order to get those dollars, they had to trade with the U.S. They had to trade with America, not because they needed to trade with America, not because they wanted to trade with America, but they needed to be able to buy oil. And in order to buy oil, they needed dollars to do that. And how you get the dollars is by trading with America. Demand for the dollar was artificially propped up by the real demand for oil. This system was entirely built on fraud. It's built on force. It's built on the strategic manipulation of conflict. And Israel has been the primary weapon in that conflict. Nothing America does is based on goodwill. Every economic policy, every security agreement, every treaty is always about control. It's always about consolidating their power. They create problems and then they try to sell you the solution. They manufacture instability. They do that. And then they make you pay for protection. It's straight up extortion. This isn't any kind of a partnership. This is a racket. And Israel's at the center of it. A permanent excuse for war. A permanent justification for intervention. A manufactured crisis to keep the Arab world in submission. The petrodollar forced nations in the world to finance America's debt, and it allowed them to weaponize the dollar against their enemies. And this then helped the U.S. to spread its military presence all around the world. See, this is what people have to understand about how this happened. Why there's 800 military bases in more than 80 countries. How did that happen? You know, no other empire in history had such an extensive military footprint. Not the British, not the Romans, nobody. But this isn't because America had conquered all of those places by force. They bought their empire, and it's been bought with the money that they alone can print, because the dollar is the global reserve currency, and every country in the world needs US dollars to buy oil, specifically. and to pay their debts and to function at all. By that time, to function at all in the global financial system, you need dollars. And the United States exploits this dependency. They fund their global military network without limit, unlike other countries. Other countries have to actually raise money through production. America doesn't have to do that. They just print more money. They just print money to cover their massive military expenditures because they know it's going to be covered because everyone else is using the dollar. So they can spend trillions and trillions on foreign military bases, endless wars, so-called global policing, without having to earn any of the money that they're using to fund all of that. And then, of course, they can, as I said before, they can weaponize the financial dependence of other countries to pressure them into submission. Any country that resists U.S. military expansion faces the risk of being cut off from the global economy. I mean, this is why so many countries have to tolerate military bases in their lands, because they know that resisting Washington potentially means financial ruin. Anyway, that's the way it's been. Then you have the IMF and the World Bank that helps with that. These two institutions that were created under the Bretton Woods system. They act as instruments of economic imperialism. They have ever since they were founded. They offer loans to struggling countries, but those loans have severe conditions attached. If a nation is in financial distress, the IMF will step in with a bailout, but only if that country agrees to certain reforms. These reforms can often include opening up their markets to corporations, neoliberal program, Western political influence, and allowing U.S. military presence. Many countries that host U.S. bases today only do so because they were financially trapped into submission. Like I said, it's not partnership, it's blackmail. A government that is economically shackled like this cannot afford to oppose U.S. strategic interests. They can't say no when Washington demands that they accept a military base, because rejecting a base, rejecting military cooperation, could mean losing access to international financial markets, losing investment, even triggering economic sanctions, economic collapse. That's why you see a pattern. If you look at it, look at the countries that have received major IMF bailouts, International Monetary Fund bailouts. Look at how many of them afterwards, after receiving those bailouts, became either new hosts to U.S. military presence or deepened their military ties with Washington. The United States, as the dominant force in the IMF, decides the terms of relief, decides the terms of the loans, when the debt payments can be delayed or when they can't be delayed, when more funds can be given or not given, when the economic noose will be tightened. All of that is more or less under the hands of the U.S. So when a country is desperate to try to stabilize their economy, the United States will present them with a deal. Accept our military presence in your country, align with our foreign policy, and in return, we will ensure that your financial system doesn't collapse. You see this pattern, this extortion pattern? This is documented throughout history. This isn't an opinion. The Philippines has hosted military bases for decades, U.S. military bases, but they went through a multiple rounds of IMF restructuring, and that made them increasingly dependent upon American capital. That's kept them a military asset for the U.S. Same thing with Greece. When they went through the Eurozone crisis, they needed IMF bailouts to survive. And at that time, they suddenly expanded their military agreements with the United States in conjunction with the bailout. And they allowed an American military, an increased military footprint in their country. South Korea is the same. After the Asian financial crisis, they had no choice but to integrate even further than they already were into the military-industrial complex of the United States. So you see the pattern. The same thing applies across Africa, Latin America, and elsewhere. Military bases as a condition for economic stability, so-called. The United States doesn't openly say, if you take an IMF loan, then you have to accept our military. No, they're more sophisticated than that. They're more subtle than that. Instead, they'll say, our military presence will provide stability. They'll frame it as protection because it's a protection racket. They'll say this is a guarantee for foreign investors that they'll feel safe putting their money into your country. But let's be honest, obviously, the US doesn't protect those countries. They're not there to protect those countries. They're there to subvert those countries and protect their own economic interests. What they're there to protect are the conditions that allow for Western corporations to dominate, to ensure that when any economic crisis hits, the affected country is not going to turn to China or to Russia or to any other alternative, but that they have to stay locked inside the American system. So America became a global hegemon because of the absence of alternatives. And they have only ever been able to maintain their status as a global hegemon by trying to prevent alternatives from emerging, because their actual power has always been relative power, not absolute power. And the truth is that their global hegemony is insufficient even to contend with regional hegemons when those emerge, or when they even might emerge. And that's what's happening now. As soon as regional hegemons, regional powers emerged, which they have, America has become de facto just another regional power, albeit with significant reach. America is a regional power now. But now even their reach is becoming untenable. This is why countries in the Muslim world, countries in Africa, countries in Asia, and so-called Latin America, all of the countries that are trying to achieve real economic sovereignty are trying to break free from the US dollar, from US dollar dependence. Because as long as the dollar controls the global economy, Washington will continue to blackmail nations into accepting their military presence and accepting subjugation. But de-dollarization is accelerating. The BRICS nations, Russia, China, even US allies are moving away from dollar-based trade. The petrodollar system is breaking. Saudi Arabia is selling oil in other currencies, in the yuan and so on. And they said that they're not renewing this agreement. Countries are building alternative financial systems. They're bypassing SWIFT, setting up their own trade networks. The fact is that America cannot afford endless wars anymore. Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine. Each one of these proves that they cannot enforce their will the way they used to. They know that the foundation of their empire, the American empire, they know that the foundation is collapsing. And this is an opportunity for nations to reclaim their sovereignty, for economies to become truly independent.
Well, that's one hell of a very educative video by the very renowned activist, American activist, Shahid Bolsen. And there are a few things that we're learning from Shahid, or from this video. And actually, Shahid Bolsen, in his idea of radical idealism, he says that the system is actually a drug, and this drug of the system, we are actually intoxicated, we are totally drunk, and we are actually indoctrinated by it so much that we are really living a lie in life. Now, this message is really straight up for Black people, or the Black community in general. You know why I believe in this? Because the sole reason is, if anyone has been subjugated, and indoctrinated and oppressed by the system, the systems, or the system of the current world as it is today, then we, the Black people, have been the victims of this system since the beginning of it. And so, according to Shahid, clearly, what we're talking about here is, it is actually time for us to challenge the existing norms. It is time to stand up against the bullies. It is time to, question, to upset the systems, the government. And Shahid really believes that America forged her way to, or its way to power, this powerful position politically that it holds today. It didn't actually earn or deserve. It tricked its way there. And so maybe it is just time, after all, to question the power that is there. And when we're talking about America, this is not exactly about American people. In fact, it is about the American system of government, because you can bear me witness that there are many Americans, you that are watching me, that really believe that there are so many things that the American government is partaking that you do not agree with. Being an American or a non-American citizen can agree there are a few things here and there. In fact, not a few things, but a couple good number of things that the American system, government system undertakes that you totally do not agree with, and especially looking it from a perspective of black people. So Shahid advocates in his school of thought, the radical idealism, that it is time to upset these norms. So he emphasizes the importance of radical idealism or radical realism, distinguishing it from emotionalism and conventional idealism. He asserts that understanding and confronting the realities of power are essential, suggesting that power must be challenged and dismantled to achieve genuine change. First of all, he says that America did not walk its way to power. America opportunistically gained a position of vantage, by taking advantage of a collapsing system right after the Second World War. And then another thing clearly brought out here is America weaponizes the financial system, because now everybody in one way or the other has to be affected by the dollar of the United States. America will use this as a weapon to bring other people down, to intimidate you, to sanction you. But at the same time, it uses the same dollar to finance its awful and questionable criminal agendas overseas and even inside of the country. So Bolsen, again, has been known to advocate for targeted actions against multinational corporations, that is the IMF, the World Bank, so on and so forth, particularly those he perceives are complicit in oppressive regimes. He believes that disrupting the operations of these entities can pressure them to withdraw support from such governments or such oppressive regimes. This approach reflects his belief in addressing systemic issues through systemic actions rather than abstract idealism or conventional idealism that we really don't know what to do to challenge a system that fabricates the truth for us. Then again, it is important to note that Bolton's methods and views have been controversial. However, Bolton advocates for a pragmatic approach that confronts power structures, directly differentiating this from what he considers as impractical idealism. You see, recently, the United States of America decided to cut off aid to South Africa and other African countries, and I think many different places in the world. But we are not really supposed to, it is not the time for us to go to our knees and start begging and asking back for this help, because simply then it means this is one way of weaponizing the financial system by always giving you the aid, advancing the aids, the financial assistances to African countries anytime they can move it if they want to force you to agree to their policies or the policies that really are up for their interest. And then there is nobody that has your interest at their heart. They have their own interest at their heart, and they will do anything to impose that to achieve what they want anytime, as long as it's going to benefit them. It doesn't matter whether it disadvantages you to which capacity. And I once saw somewhere someone say that, the American populace, or the common American citizen, is the most propagandized person on earth. And I tend to be agreeing with that lately, because the thing is, if you don't try to challenge the norms, the system of education, the history you read in that book, you continue to think that what they tell you right there is the truth, but it's not the truth. First of all, right now, most people already know, even Americans themselves, and Americans are actually pro this move, that there is a huge shift in a huge global shift towards challenging the dollar system, challenging the American imperialist perspective. But you would find that there is someone back in America who doesn't want to upset the system, who still is propagandized, thinking that the new global age is not there, that the American system cannot be challenged, that the system that has been set there cannot be questioned or upset. But the truth is, if we black people in and outside of the American continent or country, in fact, if we have to set ourselves really free from, to the road to emancipation, then we have to challenge the system as it is, because the system is not built for us. And we have to advocate to start looking to other alternatives. Africa must start forging new alliances. Black people must start looking into different direction, because then it is only when we have options that then we can have, that space to bargain. If you're not giving us a good deal for what we want, then we can always talk to someone else. But if we are forced to look into only one direction, then we as Black people and as Africa will continue to be subjugated and, in fact, indoctrinated. Talking about the American propaganda, America might not have the worst systems, but America does not have the best education system. Fact. America does not have the best health system. Fact. The American system of government are bullies. Fact. But how many people really agree with this and know this truthfully and think that this is not the way to go? There are many people who still really don't believe in this, really cannot see beyond the bubble of their American bliss. They still are thinking that, but it is the right time that you know the truth. It is the right time that you stood for the truth. It is the right time that optimistically you came out to also stand for what you believe in, to speak, to put your voice into the system, And while revolutions might take long periods of time, but they have to start somewhere. We have to start we might really never enjoy the fruits of revolutions that we start at this age, because they take ages to really to come to their fruition. But we have to start it. Someone has to begin it somewhere, so that somewhere along the line, deservedly, someone is going to be happy, get something, out of this system. So I really thought this was a very, very important thing for us to talk about, radical realism. According to this video, we can all, just really put it in a few words and say it is challenging the norms, it is upsetting and questioning the systems, and fighting propaganda and indoctrination. This is exactly the doors which you Black people, the Black community, want right now, if we have to set ourselves free. A few things we have to really start and follow and become like religious on. One, we have to come up with a community of Black people. And a community is not a neighborhood in any way. A community are a people that have something in common and can pursue a goal together. It doesn't have to be people living together. We have Black communities across the world. We have the Afro Caribbeans, we have the Afro Americans or the African Americans, we have the Afro Europeans, and then we have the Africans. We have black people all across the entire world. So when we become a community, then we become one common unit again. So what I'm trying to say is we need legit communities. Another thing we need legit business, because we need power, we need financial muscle. If at all you have to upset a system that has been running for years, that has designed its proxy ways, that has designed its trickeries and forgeries, it's not going to be easy to beat it. You need a financial capability, a financial muscle to really fight that. And when we have a community ourselves as black people, then even the products that we get from ourselves as a black people, then we can have a good market from which we can even consume the products and produce ourselves. We can produce and consume at the same time. So this is a great video, a great perspective. I don't know what you think about this. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up and share this video as well. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, I would definitely ask you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button to be part of this community. So until next time, I will be happy to see you in the next video. Peace out.